Okay, good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for your warm welcome today. I seem to do a lot of conferences in San Francisco these days, so it's a great pleasure to do something in Europe for a change. And thank you for a warm welcome to the beautiful city of Bern and the wonderful country of Switzerland. It's a real pleasure to be here. My boss, Mark Shuttleworth, asked me to send you his personal greetings. He knows that there's a lot of Ubuntu users here in this part of the world, and he would like to have come, but as you can imagine, he has many commitments, so I get to do this job instead. But Mark Shuttleworth sends you his greetings. So I want to talk to you today about some things that we see happening in the marketplace. Okay, and I think the really critical thing we see happening in the marketplace is that businesses are opening up to the idea of open source. A lot of it is to do with the economy, a lot of it's to do with changing perceptions of business needs, of why people invest in software. So I'm going to talk to you about some of these reasons, some of the things that we see happening. I'm going to specifically talk about the idea that a modern business can become 100% open source in the software and applications that it uses. This is a fairly radical idea to some organizations, but I think I hope to demonstrate that it's a feasible thing to do. I'm going to talk about 5 reasons why I think it's good for companies to choose open source. I'm going to talk about 5 particular company case studies which illustrate businesses who are using open source exclusively to run their organizations. And finally, if I have time, I'm going to talk a little bit about the annual, what we call the Ubuntu Survey. We survey a large number of businesses every year, and I'll just share some of the insights of things that we hear happening in the marketplace. I'm sure you all know Canonical. Who's an Ubuntu user? Okay, great, wonderful. Anybody upgraded to Jaunty? No? All right, well, I did this on the Jaunty Jackalope, so it's working, it's running, so if you want to upgrade, feel free. We are the commercial sponsor of the Ubuntu project. That means that we pay a lot of the costs of integration, of marketing of Ubuntu. We bring the community together, we organize marketing, which is my role, and we take responsibility for support and services around the Ubuntu product. But we're always very clear that we are part of a much larger community. You know, we are 250 people based in offices around the world, but we're part of a community of 20,000-30,000 developers who contribute overall to the Ubuntu project and the applications it supports. And we're very mindful and respectful of that community. So if you're part of the Ubuntu community as a developer or participant, you know, thank you very much for being part of that. We have 3 key products: Ubuntu Server, which I'm going to primarily talk about today, Ubuntu Desktop, and Ubuntu Netbook Remix. Does anybody have a netbook? Okay, are you running UNR? No? Well, you might like to know that as of version 9.04, which comes out in the end of this month, you'll be able to download a full version of Ubuntu Netbook Remix, which should work on most publicly available netbooks, so give it a try. So what's happening out there? Well, I guess you don't need me to tell you that it's a difficult economy. When a financial conservative like Ben Bernanke says something like that, you know you're in trouble. The inevitable consequence is that people look at their budgets, businesses look at their budgets, and one of the first things which gets cut after marketing is IT, and businesses are saying, we don't have this money, we can't afford these big infrastructure projects anymore, so we're going to cut back on those budgets. From our perspective, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, okay? Obviously, a difficult economy is bad for everybody. It makes it hard to pay the bills, makes it hard to do the investments you want to do. But from an open source perspective, okay, this economy is opening doors. You know, we have companies coming to us today, you know, phoning us today saying, we want to learn about open source, we want to learn about Ubuntu. What can you guys do for us? Yeah, when you get major organizations like Gartner telling, you know, the CIOs that they advise open source is the way to go, you know that things have changed. You know, a year ago we didn't get this. It's happening today. Here's another very important thing. The big hitters in the IT industry are turning to open source. Okay, these are all companies which have substantial open source investments and programs. HP will now ship Ubuntu and Red Hat and Novell SUSE on many of its server and desktop platforms. Acer, one of the first guys to bring out netbooks, Linux-based netbooks. You can now buy Toshiba netbooks and notebooks with Ubuntu. IBM, a fantastic supporter of open source. They spend a great deal of money on open source. More to the point, they make a great deal of money from open source. They have a multi-billion-dollar open source business, okay? So, you know, very committed to that. Look at Sun. If IBM buys Sun, maybe it's going to spend $6–8 billion buying Sun. They're not buying it for the servers, trust me, okay? They're buying it for the software, and a lot of it is open source. Sun has got some fantastic software products, and it's very, very committed to the concept of open source. Not necessarily in everything it does, but it is a believer, and a lot of the value in that organization is products like OpenOffice. Dell, probably the most notable PC-based supporter of open source. They now ship something like 12 or 13 different SKUs with Ubuntu and other open source products, and that commitment is growing all the time. We have a fantastic relationship with Dell, and you know, right from the top, Michael Dell runs Ubuntu, okay, on some of his systems. These guys are believers. The infrastructure people at the bottom, AMD, ARM, Intel. Intel have again hundreds of millions of dollars annual investment in open source, and we have a very strong relationship with those guys. They're doing great work with Moblin. We use Moblin components in Ubuntu Netbook Remix, and we're very committed to that as a way forwards. I don't know if you saw the recent announcements we made with ARM. ARM last year shipped, they shipped an ARM-based, ARM or their silicon partner shipped an ARM-based device for every person on the planet. They shipped something like 6 billion ARM-based devices, okay? ARM are very committed to open source. We've ported Ubuntu to the ARM platform, and I think in the next few months you'll see some very interesting announcements in the netbook and the mid-space concerning what ARM is doing and what we're doing with them. So again, it's a major development that we didn't see a year ago. Okay, so I'm going to move on now and talk a little bit about some of the business reasons, specifically business reasons why I think open source is good for organizations. At the back end of last year, back end of 2008, Gartner published a short paper aimed at big company CIOs looking to cut their IT budgets in a credit crunch environment. One of the recommendations was explore open source licensing. Okay, that's one of the first times that a major research organization has so publicly endorsed this as a concept, and it's changing perceptions. You know, we could see how that was opening doors for us with major organizations. We would take this information into big companies, and they say, oh, that's interesting, Gartner endorsed it, maybe we'll talk to you about it now. Things that we just didn't see previously. Obviously, it's a cost-based argument. You can cut your costs with open source, simple as that. Everybody knows that you can eliminate server licensing costs, you can eliminate desktop licensing costs, but I think increasingly now you can actually kill some of the other costs. You can kill a lot of application costs too. You know, people are aware of things like infrastructure applications like you know, the LAMP stack, Apache, and MySQL and PHP. But increasingly, there are very good quality, you know, enterprise quality, commercial quality business applications. ERP, OpenBravo, it's a superb piece of code. The Unison Communication Suite, again, it's very, very high quality commercial code. There's quite a lot of big software organizations now starting up or moving into the open source area, and I personally think it's very, very feasible these days to run a major organization on a complete stack of business application software with an open source basis. I think very importantly at the end, eliminating upgrade and migration costs. This is something which people don't always necessarily think about, but if you're CIO of a large organization, one of your biggest IT costs is the ongoing upgrade migration cycle that proprietary vendors tend to force on you, okay? If you take an open source approach, where you have much more freedom, you simply don't need to get locked into that upgrade cycle, okay? And it's a very significant amount of money that you can cut off your bottom line. So let me just talk about the first of my case studies. I can't actually tell you who this organization is. It's a very well-known UK teaching hospital. It's globally renowned for its research, for its medical care. This organization has a very important public-facing website. It's used by doctors, by academics, by patients, by families. It's a critical resource in their work. Okay, They use this website to disseminate the latest ideas, latest techniques, information on the latest drugs, latest surgical techniques. This is a website which, in their words, saves lives. Okay, people go to this website to find critical patient care information. Now, they had a problem recently with this. The traffic to this website was growing substantially. They were being asked to do quite a few more things, and they had a very limited budget, and they had a legacy platform which was proving very hard to maintain. They had a mixture of servers, mixture of systems, mixture of operating systems, and they just really didn't have the internal resources and the budgets to run this in the way that the organisation was increasingly asking them to do. One thing they could see was that the usage of resources on the servers was uneven. Some of these servers were maxed out, some of them were idling. It just wasn't an efficient way to operate this particular application platform. So they realised they needed to change to a much more stable, more efficient platform, which they were confident could run this very, very mission-critical business workload. So. You'll find all these case studies that I'm going to be talking about Ubuntu Server. In the interests of fairness and openness, I think I should point out that what I'm saying about Ubuntu is applicable to many other companies' products. Okay, so this could be equally applicable to any commercial grade Linux server. So it's not an extended version for Ubuntu Server. So they replaced all their 4 or 5 different OSs with Ubuntu Server. They added the open VZ virtualization, container-based virtualization platform, and you can go to this website to find out more. It's a very good product. They added an open source CMS. I'm not sure what it is. I think it was probably Drupal, but it could have been something else. And they added all their common workloads. So they added file and print and directory service and security and so forth. In doing that, they were able to cut their 11 servers down to 4. Okay, partly because Ubuntu Server is just fundamentally more efficient than the legacy OSs they were using, but also by the use of virtualization, they were able to spread their workloads much more efficiently around. So they've now got some spare capacity, some spare servers, and they've also got much less cost and effort involved in maintaining that system. So all the time and effort they were having to put into this, they can now go into improving the sites, improving the services, and if they ask to add new applications or new parts of the website, they can easily do that in a way that they simply were unable to before. Okay, reason 2, greater freedom. When people talk about open source, they often talk about the benefits of free in terms of both free speech and free beer. I think these are very important freedoms. Obviously, the ability to do what you want with the system is very important, and the ability to not spend huge amounts of money on that is very important. But I think from a business perspective, there's a different kind of freedom which is important, and that's the freedom to use open source applications in the way that you as a business want to use them. So you can choose the business model which works for you. Yeah, you can just run a completely free operating system, free applications, and that's it. You don't need to buy services or support if you don't want to. If you do want service and support, you can go out and find a commercial vendor who will provide them for you. Okay, but it's your choice. Nobody's going to twist your arm, constrain you to doing those things. You can mix and match the platforms, desktop systems and applications that you want. You're not being forced by a particular vendor to go down a particular route. So you don't have to run a particular mail server you don't want to. You don't have to run a particular HTTP server that you don't want to. Okay, you've got much more freedom to build a system stack, an application stack which suits your specific business. You can migrate and upgrade when you want to. One of the big problems for most people working with commercial vendors is that you have to dance to their tune. When they say it's time to upgrade, time to migrate, they have ways to force you to do that, and it costs you a lot of money, it costs you a lot of effort. You know, with the open source model, you're simply not in that place where you're forced to do those kinds of things. So you can adapt and customize the applications you buy, the stack that you build to what your business needs, your specific organizational needs. Just to illustrate what I mean by this, this is our product roadmap for the next few years. Now we have a model where we basically release a new product every 6 months, and we support those, guarantee support for those for about 18 months. But every couple of years we produce what we call an LTS, a long-term support version, okay, and that has support for 5 years out. So our current long LTS 804 is supported through to 2013. Our next version will be supported through to 2016. What this means is that you're not constrained to upgrade if you don't want to. Okay, we have businesses that are still running, 604 and 704, and we're continuing to support them on a defined timescale. There's absolutely no push from our side, no drive from our side for these guys to upgrade. And this is the same pattern that you find with most open source vendors. Okay, it recognises the fact that what's important to your business is what's important to you. It's not what's important to us. Okay, so if you don't want to upgrade, don't want to migrate, then you're free to do that. We're not going to force that upon you. Okay, and that's really the freedom that I've been talking about. So another little case study. Equitech is a Chicago-based equities trading company. Not a huge organization, I think several hundred people at the moment, but growing very fast. They have very, very time-critical proprietary trading applications. When you're trading equities, when you're trading derivatives, seconds count. Okay, so their network performance, their response times, the ability to have literally 100% guaranteed 24/7 uptime is very, very important to them. Now, as they've grown, they started out their business on Windows servers. As they've grown to around 100 Windows servers, they were starting to get scalability issues. Okay, the performance of the network was starting to degrade. They were getting unexplained slowdowns, unexplained outages, and they were having a very substantial management overhead trying to maintain, upgrade, install new servers. And they were facing very substantial licensing costs. I'm sure you all know the economics of things like Windows Server and Windows Desktop. It was a significant amount of money for a relatively small business. And as they grew, as they added new staff, they were finding their common workers overhead was actually exacerbating this situation. So the need to do things like email and file and print was actually compromising their ability for their core applications to run efficiently. So they did the sensible thing and slung out all those Windows servers and replaced them with Ubuntu Server. They changed to a fully scripted management basis for their servers. They don't do any manual installs or upgrades now. It all runs on automated scripts. They replaced their proprietary database with MySQL, and they moved all their common workloads onto Ubuntu Server. They actually managed to reduce from 100 servers to 30 servers. Okay, they no longer have latency issues. They no longer have performance issues. They no longer have mysterious outages, and they've got a nice little estate of 70 unused servers which they can now run up when they need to address their business growth. Very happy customer. Okay, reason 3, better performance. It's a simple fact that Linux-based operating systems perform better than proprietary alternatives. I'm not going to defend that statement. There's huge amounts of evidence that is the case. One of the reasons is that you can basically choose to build the OS footprint that you need. Okay, so you can run a minimal OS, you can run a fat OS, you can put in the applications that you want, you can take out the applications that you don't want. You can build a server stack that suits just what you need to do. So if you just want to do basic file and print, you can have a very, very small OS. If you want to have a very, very complex one running major database applications or business critical software, then you can do that. One of the things that is very common is that people use Linux to extend the life of hardware. Linux runs very efficiently on low-end hardware, and we see lots of organizations who are looking at very expensive upgrade processes to run next-generation proprietary operating systems, who simply find it's not the case. If they move to a Linux-based OS and they can extend the life of their hardware 2 or 3 years, it's good for them, it's good for the planet. Why buy new hardware if you don't need to? You can choose file systems. There's lots of different file systems out there. We don't force you into using any particular file system. You choose the one that's right for you. Choose a basic file system if that's all you need for file and print, but you can have something that's clustered, that's virtualized, that's high availability, has hot failover, whatever you need to suit your particular business requirement. And obviously there's a lot of different virtualization options available with open source. And again, there's different technologies, different ways of approaching this. You choose what's right for you as an organization. Okay, another case study. Very interesting company, Metal Sales Manufacturing. This is a very well-established US business, been around for quite a few decades now. As you can imagine, in the present economy, being a US-based metal products manufacturer is not a very easy place to be these days. They face a lot of competition from lower-cost producers in the developing world. They have all the problems inherent in a bad economy. And they have a very distributed business model. So they needed to find ways to increase their fundamental efficiencies of their business, okay, if they were going to survive. But they also had to address the fact that they had a lot of new applications, a lot of new requirements from coming online from the competitive situations with other providers. They have something like 19 locations around the US, so they have to support remote sales and support offices. They were burdened with a very, very slow, very old-fashioned, well-established legacy network, okay? It wasn't adaptable, it was inefficient, it was hard to move forwards, they didn't really know where they were going to go with that. And they were finding that reliability issues with that network were really hitting them in terms of customer relationships and their actual production systems. So they chucked out that old legacy network, bought themselves 50 nice new servers from Dell and HP, and obviously loaded it up with Ubuntu Server. They slung out Exchange, which was proving very hard to run, very unreliable, and put on an open source mail application. That mail application hasn't been rebooted for the last 2 years. Okay, they were having to reboot Exchange something like once a week just to maintain the efficiency of the system. They did a very interesting thing. They built their own local mirror of the Ubuntu application repository. So that runs inside their corporate firewall. So that means if they want to bring up a new server, install a new PC, put on a new application, they can do it with very, very quickly with their own resources. They now claim they can bring up and deploy, have in production a new server in 15 minutes. That's pretty remarkable, even for Ubuntu. Okay, reason 4, security and reliability. One of the big issues for many organizations today, I think you probably all read stories yesterday about some of the virus issues that people were expecting with the Configure virus. Open source gives you full transparency, okay? You can download and install binaries, but if you wish, you can compile your own code. Now, I'm not suggesting that every organization which runs Ubuntu goes through the source code line by line to check for problems. That would be ridiculous. But the truth is, when you have an open source product, it's developed in the public domain. Okay, it's subject to peer review. Nothing gets put into the main branches unless people have, trusted people have seen it. It makes it very, very difficult for people to do things to the code that you would not like. There's no commercial incentive to piracy. A lot of the problems that people get with malware, with Trojans, with those kind of threats, comes because people are downloading pirated versions of commercial applications. But if you can go to a trusted site and download a high-quality free application, there's no incentive to go and download a pirated application. So, there's no commercial incentive to people to create pirate websites and to put Trojan-loaded code out there. There's fundamentally, a much lower level of threat to open source, partly because people don't see it as being in the same place commercially, but also because it's developed in this public way. It's actually a great deal harder to do. Obviously, you can get very high quality protection mechanisms as well. We have some good stuff like App Armor in Ubuntu Server. They're a very good free antivirus thing. So if you feel the need to install those things, you can do it, and it's not going to cost you huge amounts of money. We also have very rapid update cycles, so if there are problems, we can typically push out fixes, security updates on a much regular basis, and in most cases there's no charge for doing that, so you're not locked into that continual cost upgrade cycle. Another case study, Emphony, very interesting UK-based company. They are in the business of making project management software. Their particular business model is that this project management software is web-based. It's essentially software as a service. They were a greenfield organization. They had no previous legacy issues, so they had an open choice of what they could do, whether to go with proprietary software or with an open source product. So what were their drivers? Well, they were a startup. They didn't have much money. They wanted a low-cost, low-footprint solution that wouldn't require huge amounts of expensive hardware to run on, and wouldn't cost them a lot of money to actually install. The most important thing was reliability. Okay, they're a web application delivery company, and the customers that they want to support, big construction businesses, big project management organizations, they absolutely need 100% uptime. Okay, a guarantee of service is vital to them, so it had to be very, very reliable. They keep a lot of very sensitive customer data on their servers, so security had to be absolutely paramount. And they also They also made a decision that their staff operational development environment will be the same as the customer production system, so that any problems that customers are finding will be very easily reproducible in their own internal systems. So they chose Dell, they chose Ubuntu Server, they chose a very traditional LAMP stack of Apache, PHP, and MySQL, and they also put that same LAMP stack on their desktops. They use our landscape web-based remote systems management product, and they have had tremendous performance, tremendous reliability. You know, to our knowledge, they've had no downtime whatsoever in their startup phase. They've won some very important customers, and they're growing very rapidly. Most of all, you know, this is saving them huge amounts of money. They told us they were saving tens of thousands of pounds every month simply through the use of open source software. And this is money that they can use to hire developers and to market their products. Okay, last thing, newer technology. One of the big benefits of open source is that the public development nature encourages innovation. Okay, it's one of the few areas of high technology where literally anybody can contribute. If you have a good idea, you can contribute to the open source world, and that forges a very aggressive innovation cycle. The deploy early, deploy often model. We think this is actually very beneficial to businesses because it gives them a chance to stay right on the leading edge of applications, to investigate the new stuff that's coming out, to find ways to generate competitive advantage from using new product ideas. We have 6-month release cycles. Many people do the same kind of thing. I think one of the big benefits of that is that most of our updates and upgrades are not massive changes. Okay, I just upgraded to our latest release, Jaunty Jackalope, a couple of days ago, and it's just painless. I mean, it just happens, and there's no you don't need to kind of wipe your systems clean and start again. There's no data transfer, there's no applications transfer. It's a very painless thing to do. And when we talk to big corporate organizations, this is what we hear. They say, we've got 10,000 desktops or 100,000 desktops or 5,000 servers. We simply cannot afford the time and effort to do mass in-place OS and application updates and installs. It's a very painful thing for those organizations. So the typically low footprint open source upgrade model works very well for those kind of businesses. I talked a little bit earlier on about the opportunity to choose sort of LTS or latest versions. Again, it's matching what you want to do to your business model rather than having it forced on you by a proprietary vendor. Right, final case study. Again, I can't, for commercial reasons, tell you who this organisation is, but it's an up-and-coming internet-based multicast TV provider. They have a very interesting business model. What they do is they provide local TV services to expatriates, so British people living in the Middle East who want to watch the BBC, or US citizens in Europe wanting to watch CNN, or Arab customers in France wanting to watch Al Jazeera, or whatever it is. Okay, they enable people to take their home TV programming back to where they're actually working. It's very important for such people that they have some kind of connection with what they're familiar with. So these TV services are very important. So it's quite an innovative business model. It's a very high technology offering. There's a lot of sophisticated technology lies behind their ability to deliver this. They have a very globalized customer base, people in 100 or so countries. It's a very high bandwidth service. They're serving out very large amounts of data from their server farms. And obviously, if you're providing a TV service, it's got to be very reliable. People aren't going to sign up for a service which goes down or which is blocky or jerky. It's got to be a very high quality service. So they started out with a mixture of different servers. They found it wasn't as reliable and as performant as they would like, so they recently migrated all their servers to Ubuntu Server. They've built an automatic upgrade process because their business model is to deploy servers close to the customer requirements. So they put the TV servers out near where they find their customers, but obviously they can't send engineers out to all those locations to maintain and upgrade their services. So they've built a scripted automated update process which allows them to do upgrades in place without engineers attending. They chose to go with an LTS version for stability. Again, they don't have the ability to send people all over the world to work on these servers, so the stability of the platform is very important. They use VLC, very high quality open source player. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. They adopted an open source video server, which they've done a lot of work on themselves to customize for their use. And they found it to be a tremendously stable and very high performance platform. And as a business, they're now growing very rapidly on the back of this. And you'll probably be hearing more about this organization in the not too distant future. Okay, I guess I've probably got a few more minutes. I'm just going to talk very briefly about what we call the Canonical Server Survey. This is something that we do every year for the past 2 or 3 years. It's a survey that we run in conjunction with an analysis company called RedMonk. It's a large-scale survey. We surveyed about not quite 7,000 businesses last year. We do it in English. There's no incentives for people to complete the survey, so it's done on a goodwill basis, and it covers a very broad range of companies, from individuals up to some major organizations. The reason we do it is twofold. Firstly, we as a business want to understand what people are doing with our products and with similar products so that we can drive our product development processes. We want to identify if there are any issues or barriers to deployment of these products, understand where the future trends are, but also it has a very strong PR aspect to it. We use this as a PR method to tell the world what's happening in the open source business arena. Respondents come from all over the world. Obviously, it tends to be a bias to Europe because that's where we are. But even the smallest contributing areas like Africa and Oceania had well over 100 respondents. So it's a fairly good, clean survey of what's happening out there in the world. This is very interesting. You'd expect there to be lots of organisations with 1 to 10 staff, but you'd expect this pie chart segments to get smaller and smaller and smaller as you get around. That's the typical distribution of organisations. What we found is there's a real hotspot in mid-sized businesses using Ubuntu. We've probably got 3 or 4 times as many people in the mid-range, the 100 to 1,000 person companies using Ubuntu Server as we expected. This is different from a year ago. Okay, a year ago this was a much smaller slice of the pie, and what it shows is that there's a growing acceptance of adoption of open source servers in those kind of organisations. What have they got installed? Well, the green line is Windows. It still shows it's particularly in large organizations, it still tends to be the dominant install. But if you add up Linux and BSD and proprietary Unix, actually that tends to be the dominant area. And again, this is something that's changed over the past year or so. We're starting to see the yellow bars, the blue bars growing in comparison to the green bars. Most interestingly, we're seeing that trend in the large organizations. In terms of distribution of where you'll find open source, obviously it tends to be very popular in the technical organizations here, very popular in education and government. But even when you look at across the piece really in commercial organizations, financial services, insurance, manufacturing, retail, non-profits, there's a very balanced use of, growing use of open source. What are people doing with open source? Well, inevitably common workloads, web, file and print tends to dominate, but we're seeing a growing influence of things like security, infrastructure, virtualization. Line of business apps, ERP and CRM, still not particularly strong, perhaps 5 or 10% of the use of these kind of servers, but I think our own experience is that people are starting to realize there are very good quality applications available in that space. What are people looking for in open source servers? Very, very easy to see that the dominant areas, the purple and the green, are around things like hardware support, updates, package management, security, product upgrades. These are by far the dominant concerns. Product life cycles and support costs matter. What surprised us in the survey was that people were people were very unconcerned about the size of the companies they were dealing with. There tends to be a theme that you'll hear from proprietary vendors that you have to be big, you have to be global, you have to be universal. That's not what we found from the survey, okay? People are very, very open to adopting software products from small organizations, provided they feel they're quality products with quality support. A much more balanced response to the question of what's critical features. Obviously, security is important, backup, firewalls, hardening, virtualization. But the dominant feature is that when people are evaluating open source server products, they look for a very wide, broad, out-of-the-box feature set. They want to be able to install these products and then choose the applications, the infrastructure components that they want to suit them as businesses. In terms of what the people look at in virtualization, VMware is still obviously very, very dominant, but we've seen a very rapid rise of some of the open source virtualization components, KVM and Xen particularly. What's interesting is that it's very, very consistent across organizational size. So the big guys are just as interested in things like KVM and Xen as they are in VMware. Again, that's kind of a surprise to us. We have a business interest in the cloud computing marketplace. You may have noticed that in our next release of Ubuntu, we have built-in cloud capabilities, both compatibility with Amazon, but also compatibility with the Eucalyptus internal cloud technology. We asked companies whether they were interested in cloud, whether they thought it was an enterprise-ready technology. And again, rather to our surprise, 60% of them said that they believed that cloud was ready for the enterprise, and 30% actually already had cloud deployment plans. Again, we were quite surprised by how high that was. And we did some additional market research around this question. We had a market researcher call a lot of big organizations and ask them about cloud. And again, a lot of it is to do with the economic environment. People see cloud as a way to grow and shrink their server environments according to economic needs. So if business falls, they can shrink their server needs. If business grows, they can grow their server needs with an elastic cloud model. So I think cloud is something that's going to be big over the next couple of years. We asked people whether they were planning to deploy more open source servers, and the good news was that 65% of them were. So I think it's despite the economic downturn, which is obviously driving a reduction in spending, what we're actually seeing is that there's still business requirements and people are looking for more effective, more appropriate, lower cost ways to deploy those servers to address those business requirements. Okay, so it's been a very rapid run through. I'm happy to answer any questions. I guess my overall message would be that we all know it's a tough economic environment, but if you're in the open source business, it's a good place to be because there's a definite growing corporate requirement for the kind of technologies and interests that we all share as people. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rodaway. We now have 3 minutes for questions.
Are you think about easy way for migrating from one LTS version to the next LTS version?
I missed the first part of your question, sorry.
Are you thinking about a solution, easy solution for migrating one LTS, the actual LTS, to the next LTS version?
Well, clearly, if you've stayed on a particular version for a long time, and if you're going to, 2 years further on, it's a bigger leap than it's going to be if you're continually upgrading. In practice, we haven't experienced major questions from people saying they want to upgrade between 2 LTS versions. I guess it's still relatively early in that process cycle, so it may well be that not many major organizations have yet to make that leap from one LTS to another LTS. We run these ourselves, so if there are problems, we will personally experience them. We do eat our own dog food at Canonical. We are a 100% open source business, and we run the same. We run our business on our products. So if there are going to be those kind of issues, then we will discover them as soon as anybody else discovers them. So I know it's not a very complete answer to your question, but the truth is we're not yet getting major industry feedback there's any LTS migration issues.